are Si Begg. You're a very multi-talented guy. You've been making music since 1993. Apparently so. You've been on multiple record labels doing remixing. You've done soundtrack work. For anyone who isn't that familiar with you, who are you? Who is Si Begg? And sort of what are all the hats you wear?
My name is Si Begg, and yes, I'm a musician. As I say, I've been going for quite some time. I suppose if I go through it chronologically, I started off playing in bands quite traditionally, but I'd always liked electronic music. And as a guitarist, I started playing around with the effects pedals more than the guitar, and then I started to build up a home studio and just got deeper and deeper into the whole electronic thing. And so that's what got me into electronic music. This was kind of, I suppose, just before the whole rave thing kicked off. So it's kind of mid-'80s. So I was interested in the early experimental stuff like Cabaret Voltaire and all these kind of weird lo-fi electronic things.
Okay.
Then I got into the dance music thing and started producing dance music. I was still doing the experimental stuff on the side, but there wasn't so much interest in that. There was more interest in the dancey stuff. So I did a lot of that. And then I think as things progressed, I got more and more interested in the scoring side of things. That's always something that I had at the back of my mind I wanted to do. So I tried to head towards that arena. So I'd say over the last 10 years, I've been trying to drift more across into TV, film, and things like that.
Right.
And along the way doing sound design as well. And yeah, so anything, I don't see too much difference in music and sound design. To me, it's all the wonderful world of noise. So I kind of, spread it
sure.
down.
So you started off playing in lots of bands, and sort of in childhood. Did you what kind of instruments were you learning? Was it sort of?
I started on. I think the first thing I really played probably was the drums. Actually, I had drum lessons and played the drums. Then I realised I wanted to write songs, so I then learned the guitar. Kind of taught myself,
Right.
and because there'd always been a piano in the house, I'd always noodled about on that. So I was kind of jack of all trades, master of none. That's been my general or musical training.
Right. Okay. What kind of music were you playing at that time? Was it sort of more rock inspired, then moved into electronica, or?
Yeah, it was a mixture. I was quite into old stuff. So I was quite into. My brother was a massive he was into Deep Purple and things like that, and kind of Led Zeppelin, all that kind of thing. And so I used to listen to a lot of that when I was, early teens.
Yeah.
But then found the weirder stuff through that. So I was quite into kind of the early psychedelic stuff and strange, prog rocky things, all that kind of thing.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But then at the time, especially when I was brought up in the Midlands, there were bands like Napalm Death around and things like that. So there was this kind of hardcore, thrashy thing. So it was kind of a weird mixture of old psychedelia, but with quite kind of heavy, hard, noisy, thrashy stuff.
Cool.
Really weird mixture. But yeah, it was fun anyway.
Yeah, definitely. And sort of, how did the electronica spring from that? Because I know some people who've certainly gone from rock into electronic music. So I did more or less the same. I got really into sort of drum and bass from going from heavy sort of metal in my teens, and then I listened to a lot of electronic and dance music for a long time, and sort of I've started drifting back to rock again.
Yeah.
So was it sort of watershed, or was it a gradual slide?
Because there was always a parallel, because there was, I think at the same time I was getting into all this old 70s rock, along the way I discovered krautrock, and through there discovered Tangerine Dream,
right?
Then Kraftwerk and all this kind of stuff. So I was always very much into that stuff, but it didn't seem so feasible, because the equipment in those days was so expensive. You saw all these pictures of these amazing modular setups. Thought, I'm never going to be able to afford that. All I've got is a guitar, But then that's why I think if there was a watershedy moment for me, it was bands like Cabaret Voltaire and some of the early industrial bands, because they were using they were using radios and tape loops and cheap equipment. And I thought, maybe we can do something. Then I got a 4-track, and it was like, this is possible. And then as the equipment started to get cheaper, then I kind of got into it. And so it was more of a drift, but there was always a bit of a parallel, the kind of electronic and band stuff running together. But the mix.
Yeah, and I mean, now you see artists, touring with sort of almost quite minimal rigs, doing electronic and live band stuff anyway, and that is their genre almost.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, it's really cool. So one of your latest projects among many has been Hauntology for Zero G. We'll have a quick listen to the trailer so everyone sort of has an idea of what we're talking about, and we'll carry on from there. So yeah, organic electronica is kind of a nebulous term in that you can definitely feel the vibe throughout the entire library, but how would you put that into words for someone if you had to just describe it without letting them hear it?
I suppose it came from a feeling that so much stuff, I mean, I love digital technology. It's allowed us to do so many amazing things, but I think things were getting so clean, so digital, so neat and tidy, that I found myself trying to get sounds that had a bit more. I suppose I was trying to get sounds that sounded more like some of these records I was talking about earlier, like early 1970s synth albums. And you realise a lot of that is because they didn't have such good equipment, and there was a lot of hiss and buzz and warped tapes and all a bit messy. And so I tried to get some of that feeling. So things weren't perfect and pristine. They were a bit hissy, a bit buzzy, a bit kind of wobbly, and all a bit kind of crackly pots and all that kind of thing. So it was, I suppose, imperfect electronic music rather than that crystalline, perfect digital purity, CD quality. It was to go back to tape quality, or kind of fourth hand tape that you'd copied off a mate and copied and copied and copied. And, you hear bands like Boards of Canada and all these kind of people that have these lovely, lush, slightly wobbly, tape hissy kind of sounds. It was that kind of thing I was looking for.
That sort of authentic analog, from the original era of electronic music.
Yeah, and also the using that approach of just being not, I suppose, kind of really, if a certain synth has a quirky quality to it, using that quirky quality, not trying to make it do something it's not designed to do, but making it something very unapologetically synthesizery and raw and just, as it is. The real character of the instruments, the character of the processing equipment I'm using, and all that kind of thing.
Nice. So when we were talking about it beforehand, we were writing sort of the description for the product.
Yeah.
You're saying that sort of it was a collection of various sort of B cuts that you'd accrued over the years, and loads of synths that you'd come across. Can you remember any of the synths, or did you use any synths when you were sort of putting it actually together? Yeah,
I did use. I got out all my old analogs. Well, not all of them, but quite a few of them. Things like Sequential Circuits Pro 1, which was one of my favourites. A lot of Korg MS-10 on there.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
A nice this Roland JP 8000, one of their big, nice polysynthy things.
Right.
And I've got these effects units that are circuit bent. So there's a circuit bent Zoom effects unit, which is quite fun. A circuit bent Chaos pad. A very old EMS Synthy E, and putting things through the desk. And on top of that, I went through all my early recordings that I made were either on quarter-inch reel-to-reel or on cassette.
Mm-hmm.
And just over the last few years, I've spent ages transferring that onto the hard drive.
Yeah.
In the process, I was always listening out for nice little bits that I could use. So I kind of built up this whole pile of usable sounds from, because some of them were also, I didn't have a multi-track, but I'd done kind of hard panning. So there'd be the drum machine in the left and the synth in the right. So I could just get the synth part or just the drum machine part. And
okay.
so I kind of extracted all sorts of bits and bobs from there. So they have the real hissy, saturated quality to them. So
that massive throwback. Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice. So, how much processing is there on, certainly the newer synth recordings you've done, and so or even on the previous ones if you're polishing them up? I say polishing them, but getting them to the same level as the others. What does one of those chains look like?
I suppose I try to keep things pretty simple, so I would not process things too much. I'd certainly take things from, if I was recording the new recordings from synths, they would go through my desk, which is an old Mackie desk.
Okay.
And then straight into Logic. I do everything in Logic. And then sometimes I normally do a little bit of EQ just to bring out the qualities that I was looking for. As I say, quite often actually bringing up the top end hiss and all to kind of bring out some of that hiss and make it a bit more gritty and grimy. But I tried not to process things too heavily inside the computer. I tried to do any processing. I would either be using the circuit bent effects units or just the EQs on the desk, or kind of just, I used a wah-wah pedal, stuff some things through that. Sometimes just put things through like the MS-10 just to use the kind of distortion in there, overdrive things a bit. So I really tried to do all as analog as I could.
Yeah. Obviously you're a big fan of more analog gear and trying to keep it in the real world rather than the computer. We've mentioned circuit bent units and synths quite a lot, and I know what that means, but shall we, if we just quickly cover that for the guys who don't necessarily know what circuit bending is?
I can even show you here.
Yeah.
This is my circuit bent Zoom effects unit. And before, these are all the normal controls you would have, but this has all these other switches added, and this big knob here, which basically just mangles the sound in ways that it never should have done. And most of the sounds you get do tend to be pretty nasty and gnarly and dirty, but that's kind of half the fun. And so it's very unpredictable. You can flick all these switches and anything could happen, but it's a lot of fun. It's quite random. And that is I could just reach this one as well. Rather pretty. This is the Chaos Pad with its rather nice little blue unit on the side again.
Oh, wow.
Switches. I don't know exactly what the technical terms. I think the knob, something to do with clocking, the clock speed. So the lower you go, things like a reverb will get hugely long. Quality will drop. So you get lots of hiss and weird artifacts and stuff. So you get some really interesting sounds.
Yeah.
That's that circuit bending. It's a lot of fun. So if you've got any old equipment, I can highly recommend. It's worth doing. The company I use, they're called, I think it is just circuitbenders.co.uk. So you can go and check them out. They're brilliant.
Cool. So it's literally diving into the literal circuits of the hardware and making it do things that it's not meant to.
Exactly, yes.
Nice.
But if you just Google it, there's whole websites of people obsessed with it. It's brilliant.
Yeah.
It's fun.
There's a really fun sort of rage of circuit bending kids toys.
Yes. Yeah.
That it's just absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah.
So going back to Hauntology, we got off track a little bit. Now we talked about a lot of your early influences and sort of your descent into electronica, both the popular end of stuff and also the more avant-garde areas.
Yeah.
Now, Hauntology is really reminiscent of that period, as we've talked about, all that early electronic stuff.
Yeah.
Were there any key influences you had in mind when you were designing it, or was it more...
I think the key influences were certainly all the BBC radiophonic workshop stuff. 'Cause I was a Doctor Who obsessive when I was young, and I think all those sounds are just ingrained in my brain somewhere. And yeah, I just love all those early recordings, Delia Derbyshire and all that kind of stuff. Absolutely fantastic. And there were other shows as well at the same time that were using early electronic music, and it was often quite raw and weird and jarring and quite unpleasant. Again, very different to the kind of clean-cut electronic music you would hear now. So I think that's had a huge influence. And I think also probably things like John Carpenter and the early synth film scores, which again, quite rudimentary equipment, very simple, just drones and hums and, you know, cheap drum machines, all that kind of thing. So I'd say that's probably quite a big influence. Because, I just love all that stuff. That's what I kind of grew up hearing and being slightly terrified by as a child. Because I think there's, you know, they're just incredibly spooky. Some of these early electronic scores you hear, absolutely terrifying. You know, it's brilliant.
Yeah, and I mean, when we were talking about John Carpenter's early stuff, and it mostly being sort of drones and that sort of level of scoring, it's almost come full circle, because I was back in October when we were looking at horror scores for recent films. A lot of it's sound design now. It's all drones.
Yes.
And it's sort of come right back round from the full orchestral score to this electronic, as a cleaner, sort of more modern sound design, which I thought was really interesting. Yeah,
but then there's been some great... I was a big fan of the score for Ex Machina that Jeff Barrow and Ben Salisbury did. You know, that's like beautiful analog synth. And it harks back to those early scores, but it's not retro. It's kind of a fresh take on it, but it has that feel, that slightly otherworldly, this very simple electronic kind of drones and arpeggios just rattling away, being slightly spooky. It's brilliant.
Yeah. So back in November, was Extreme Environments you released as an album? Yeah.
Yes.
Did you pull any sort of workflow ideas from that into Hauntology, or was it more your soundtrack-inspired work that's sort of led into it?
Probably a bit of both, because certainly on Extreme Environments, I similarly was trying to make sounds that had an organic quality to them, a complex quality, not just clean, pure sounds, but they had a gritty texture to them that made them seem a bit more real, in inverted commas. So I think there was a similar thinking behind Extreme Environments.
Yeah.
But just a slightly different approach. In fact, I have considered doing another version of Extreme Environments, but using analog sources, so kind of extreme analog environments. So that's something else in the pipeline. Who knows?
That'd be really cool.
Yeah, it'd be quite fun, I think. So nice. There is definitely a similarity. I think I think it's a general desire to try and make sounds that have as much the same kind of richness and depth you'd expect from acoustic instruments, but in an electronic environment. That's what I'm kind of hoping to achieve.
That's the aim.
Yeah.
Cool. So since 1993, when you officially began as a recording artist, you've gone under a lot of different artist names, pseudonyms, and you've both released your own you've gone on your own record labels, and you've been on others as well. And you said that you're working on sort of the avant-garde stuff, the more experimental stuff, as well as the popular stuff, certainly in the early days. Did you ever start a project in mind that this is going to go under this title, or was it sort of I'm going to see where this goes, and then we'll put it over to one afterwards?
It tended to be different record labels. So a record label wanted me exclusively, and I didn't want to give them my own name exclusively, so I ended up with these pseudonyms. And so different pseudonyms had a sound that suited that record label. So it was more, so I did tend to do stuff with a pseudonym in mind, because I had a record label in mind and a certain style in mind. So I generally would have a plan. Sometimes I just come up with something and then I think, which one would that suit? But more often than not, I would think, right, today I'm going to do something for this pseudonym, and kind of work along those lines. Which has kind of changed now, because I'm doing more stuff that's commissioned for film and TV and stuff, which is a very different process, because you're doing everything for a very definite purpose. So it's less noodling and more, we want this. Like, okay, I'll go and do it then. So it's kind of changed over the years. But yes, I always try and make time for just doing stuff for fun and just experimenting. Because I think if you stop experimenting, then you won't come up with anything new.
Of course, yeah. So going back to less hauntology questions, are there any sort of bands, artists that you would definitely point people towards at the moment? Like, what's on your iTunes playlist currently?
Oh, that's a good question. I seem to spend so much time at the moment listening to a lot of film scores, because that's what I'm primarily interested in at the moment. So I'm really kind of listening to what's going on there. I have to say my favourite composer was sadly Johan Johansson, who was just died rather unexpectedly. But I think that's such a shame, because Arrival for me is one of the best film scores of years. I really like the new Phantom Thread score, Johnny Greenwood, who's brilliant as well.
Cool.
So I've been listening to a lot of that kind of world. And electronic stuff, it's funny, most of what I've been listening to is old stuff. I've been discovering things, digging stuff, especially the krautrock stuff, which there's so many albums that are not so much heard of. I just watched a great documentary, it's a Brian Eno documentary, and he talked about his work with Cluster, who were a relatively unknown German bunch, and so I've been digging deep into their catalogue. That's a great thing about, whatever people think about streaming and royalties and all the rest of it, things like Spotify are amazing how quickly you can find all these rare bits and bobs. So much of it's up there now, so it's great. You can spend a whole afternoon, diving through obscure realms of electronic music. So I've been listening to a lot of that kind of stuff. Another great label, Bureau B, which is a Hamburg label that reissue lots of this German stuff. Absolutely fantastic. So as far as new stuff goes, that's kind of, I haven't been keeping up. I should do probably, but yeah, not as much as I should.
Fair enough.
I was just listening the other day. There's a few bits coming out of Annihilation, which is the new film from the same crew that made Ex Machina, Alex Garland, and again it's Jeff Barrett, Ben Salisbury. It's a new score by them. That sounds absolutely brilliant. I've heard a few bits, and that's
cool.
Can't wait to hear the full release of that.
Yeah,
that's another great label actually, Invada, who released loads of great film scores, mainly electronic stuff. They did the Mr. Robot. They released that on vinyl, and loads of great scores. So that's a good thing worth checking out, definitely.
Nice.
Top tip.
Fair enough. So sticking on film scores, obviously I certainly think that people are paying more attention to the scoring nowadays, and the sound design. I mean, once upon a time, it sort of used to be the musos that would listen to the soundtracks or would know who the composer was. But nowadays, like, everyone knows who people like Hans Zimmer are.
Yeah.
Do you reckon that because of that awareness, film soundtracks are becoming more popular, and sort of people will pick them up and listen to them in their sort of everyday lives?
Yeah, I think that is true. I think they are becoming more. People would, like, say, pay more attention. They didn't use it as background music, whereas now people, I think, are more aware. And like I said, people like Hans Zimmer are doing huge concerts where he's playing, his film scores, which wouldn't have happened years ago. So I think there is more awareness, and I hope that leads to more. Because I still think there is a tendency in the film score world for things to be quite conservative. If there's a good formula, like the moment is very much the Hans Zimmer thing, then let's all do Hans Zimmer sound-alike. So it'd be nice. Yeah. I'm hoping that this interest will make people think outside the box a bit more and open the doors, which I think it is. I think, already, even just 10 or 15 years ago, it was very much orchestral scores back to back. And now we are hearing more experimentation and more electronic stuff, or more, might still be acoustic, but using interesting techniques and articulations and trying to make things not just sound like John Williams and which is nothing wrong with that. I love a good John Williams score, but we need some new ideas.
Yeah, they've all got their time and place, and exactly. It's nice to see something a bit fresher, a bit weirder come onto the scene. Yeah. that sort of leads into my next question. Sort of as we get great soundtracks come out that are slightly weirder, pushing boundaries, do you reckon that's going to feed into more people picking up or trying to get into the more experimental side of music? Because that used to be just reserved for the academics at one point.
Yeah, maybe so. I don't know. I'd hope so. I certainly think. Yeah, I mean, I know for myself. When I first, a lot of my exposure to contemporary, experimental, serious avant-garde music was through film, because it was things like I love science fiction films, and I had the record of 2001: A Space Odyssey, and all the weirdest bits were by this guy called Ligeti. I thought, who's this Ligeti? And so you search up and find out he's this composer who's been doing insane music for 40 years, and you discover a whole world of avant-garde music. So I do think it can open doors, because I know on the new Twin Peaks, the new season of Twin Peaks, there's this mental bit where he uses, I can't remember the exact name of things, Requiem for Hiroshima or something, which is another quite big piece of contemporary music that's, again, people have heard of it now, because they're like, what was that crazy bit of music on Twin Peaks? And they've searched and found it. And yeah, so hopefully this will open people's minds a bit to music beyond. I think it also opens your mind to music beyond songs, interesting sonic experiences rather than just first chorus. So it might make people think a bit more beyond, think about, music that just affects your mood. It doesn't have to have lyrics or a chorus. It can just be something that gets you in a way, which is what film music tends to do.
Yeah, it's not only opening up sort of the tones that we think are acceptable, but also sort of free format kind of stuff. And not even just sticking with instruments that we recognize. Yeah. I mean, even synth sounds that we recognize. Sort of really delve into the sound design of it.
Yeah.
So if we had some guys watching and they were really keen to get into electronica or dance music or the really experimental stuff, top tips. What would you recommend, whether it's actual workflow or philosophical kind of stuff? What would you say to them?
I would say, my whole thing has always been, especially with electronic music, is it's about the sound, it's about the tones, it's about just trying to make sounds that are different. My main aim half the time, well, I don't know, it's not always my aim, but often my aim is to try and make something that sounds like nothing anyone's heard before, which with electronic music should be possible. Hopefully.
Yes.
Although it's getting harder because everyone's doing everything. But yeah, just experiment, push it. That's what this equipment's here for. Don't be satisfied with the presets. Noodle around, and don't be worried about making mistakes or making things that sound horrible. There might be something in that. Dig deeper and just keep noodling away. That's what I would suggest. And don't be afraid to be original. And you don't. And I think there's a lot of talk. I think the only downside of electronic music is because you can get very hung up on production and that idea that there's right things to do and wrong things to do. You have to EQ a bass drum like this, and you have to EQ, a hi-hat like that. It's like, just go with what sounds right. If it sounds right, then go with it. Don't worry about what the right way to mix something is. Just follow your instincts, because that's the great thing about electronic music. You can constantly be, with electronic music now, the computer, you can control everything. So, just try it, see it, and if it works, it works. Go with it. That'd be nice.
Almost a sort of jazz mentality. Anything flies as long as it sounds good.
Exactly, definitely. So don't get too hung up on the production.
Cool. So if we were to drop you in the middle of nowhere, you get 2 albums, two synthesizers or 2 instruments, what are you taking?
I think if it was albums, it would be Kraftwerk, Computer World.
Okay.
Because I love that.
Yeah.
And I think it was the first electronic music album that just really blew my mind. So that's always been one of my favourites.
Cool.
Then possibly, I don't know, probably a Frank Zappa album, because I like Frank Zappa a lot.
Yeah.
Don't know which one. Maybe Uncle Meat, which actually is a Mothers of Invention album, if you're going to be picky, when he had his band, Mothers of Invention.
Right.
Equipment-wise, I'd probably take a possibly. I do like a nice, good old, maybe the memory have my old Korg MS-10, because
Yeah.
it just has such a lovely quality to it, and it's got a bit of patchability. As long as I have a few patch chords, so I've got a bit of patching, so you got lots of fun to do there. And then maybe probably an acoustic instrument of some sort. Maybe it's a nice piano or a nice.
Everyone always says piano. There's something about a piano. Everyone loves it.
Or a nice acoustic guitar.
Yeah. Yeah, fair enough. So, I mean, recently you've been busy soundtrack-wise. You've got some of your music onto one of the Blade Runner 2049 trailers. You've been doing Lovesick for Netflix.
Yeah.
Just signing off, where do you want people to go? Where can they find your music? Let the people know what you got going on.
I have some new stuff. What's coming up next? I mean, I had an album called Blueprints that was out last year. That's another part of the Hauntology strand, actually. Was when I made this album, I was using a lot of these techniques to make this album. That kind of also fed into then doing the library, because I decided to do an album that was very much hardware based. But that's worth checking out. And next I've got a couple of films coming up. One called Peripheral that has a very electronic soundtrack, but I don't know when that's going to be out. It's going to be probably a good 6 months before anyone sees that. And there will be more stuff along the way. I think you have to keep your eyes out. There'll be stuff. But
best place to find this kind of stuff on release? SoundCloud, website?
I suppose, I try and keep my stuff updated. I've got a Bandcamp page, which is a Si Begg, bandcamp.com/Si Begg, or is it .co.uk? I think it's .com.
We'll sort it out in the description. It's
fine. And everything's on Spotify.
Yeah.
You can find it. It's all out there. And my SoundCloud is pretty good, actually.
Yeah.
Which is just /Si Begg. There's quite a few free bits and bobs up there you can download. And a few things that haven't been released, just odds and ends that I throw up all the time. So always worth checking out the SoundCloud.
Cool. And if they want to see you on social media, Twitter, Facebook?
Yeah, Facebook and Twitter, just Si Begg. It's all up there. So have a search around. You'll find me blathering away.
Making noise.
Yeah, most definitely.
Awesome. Well, thank you for your time, Si. I really appreciate it. It's been great to talk to you. And everyone check out Hauntology. It's a really solid library. Really enjoying it.
Jolly good.
Cool. Well, thanks very much.
No worries.